The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability, which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Dasha, and for the next hour, I will be reading from the Friday, February 6th issue of the Niagara Falls Review on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. On the front page today, we have several articles. Cemetery discussion leads to shouting match. The big picture of Imam Asad Mahmoud, who spoke during Thorold City Council's Tuesday meeting about facilitating changes to the municipality's cemetery bylaw to allow for specific burial practices to be accommodated. The article is by Matthew P. Barker. Discussion about Thorold's controversial cemetery bylaw gave rise to shouting and name-calling as a leader of the city's Islamic community sought compassion. City Councilman Tim O'Hare put forth a motion Tuesday to remove from the bylaw a clause that prohibits burials in unopened sections. A vote to defer the motion so a staff report on the topic could be produced narrowly passed, with Mayor Terry Ugolini casting a tie-breaking vote. But ongoing disruptions marred discussion, which included a delegation by Asad Mahmoud, Imam of Mosque Aisha, who was there to speak to O'Hare's proposed bylaw amendment. Alina Masood, 18, died on Highway 406 on December 3rd. She was ejected from the vehicle she was a passenger in and was struck by multiple cars while laying in the northbound lanes. Hours before she was to be buried in Lakeview Cemetery, and as her grave was being excavated by city employees, her family was informed the burial could not proceed, as the grave's location violated the bylaw preventing the sale of plots in unopened sections of the cemetery. The bylaw was approved May 20th, 2025, and went into effect July 15th, and includes a previous amendment from July 11th, 2023. Masood was instead interred in a Niagara Falls cemetery. Thorold had offered an alternative site within Lakeview Cemetery to family members, but they declined, believing it would not meet the burial customs of their faith. It came out afterwards that the city's offer included an attempt to meet those needs. Ugolini repeatedly had to slam his gavel while requesting decorum in council chambers Tuesday, as Mahmoud was continually interrupted by a man in the audience yelling this was his country. Some councilors accused Mahmoud of trying to push a narrative of segregation in areas of the cemetery. The meeting turned into a shouting match between Councillor Jim Handley and Ugolini after the councillor accused Mahmoud of claiming, quote, the city of Thorold Cemetery is already segregated. I don't know if I heard the Imam right. I just want to clarify something. The city of Thorold has no segregated areas in the cemetery at this time, and you wish to have a segregated area yourself? As the conversation devolved, Handley shouted for a correction over the segregation matter, even though Mahmoud made it clear in his presentation, segregated burials are not what the Muslim community is seeking. You need to correct this. You should have said it 2 months ago, Handley shouted over the mayor, who was trying to de-escalate the situation. Ugolini, angered, corrected Handley by pointing out that the city had clarified its position on cemeteries in December. It was put out in our correspondence, if you read it, he said. Following a controversy in December over the burial dispute, the city issued a public apology to the Masood family and clarified the sequence of events. Mahmoud made it clear in his presentation Tuesday the Muslim community wants to have their beliefs and burial customs acknowledged and accommodated. This word segregation that was used, it's misleading, and it's giving a different shade to the issue we're presenting to the council, he said. Mahmoud said, the Muslim community welcomes anyone to be buried alongside them, but Islam has specific burial customs, particularly in the placement of the body. Bodies are aligned with the city of Mecca, he said. Located in Saudi Arabia, it is the holiest city in Islam. When we pray in life, we stand shoulder to shoulder in the mosque, and this is how we like to bury our loved ones after they die. We are asking for a facilitation, he repeated, for council to facilitate a community, a different faith, different values. We face toward a different direction. We bury our people in a different way. O'Hare said, the issue is not about a forced narrative, which some counselors insisted is present. Rather, it's focused on religious freedoms and the right to have burials according to their faith. This is not about segregation, as we've heard. This motion is about acceptance, inclusion, tolerance, and compassion, he said. Counselor Mike DeVitis said in Segregation Talk was fear-mongering and divisive and did nothing to improve the city. A lot of people in the public are misinformed. All that's BS. It's not true. There are rules in place with the Bereavement Authority of Ontario, BAO, and human rights, he said. There's a lot of fear for no reason. They're not going to change anything. In December, BAO carried out an inspection of Lakeview Cemetery and identified compliance requirements after receiving complaints from the Muslim community regarding the city's refusal to allow the burial of a young person. It issued an inspection letter which identifies compliance requirements under the Funeral, Burial, and Cremation Services Act and its regulations to the city, which is licensed by the BAO as the operator of the cemetery. It did not, at the time, identify what those specific requirements are. BAO is the provincial government regulator that oversees operation of cemeteries in Ontario. In an interview after Tuesday's meeting, O'Hare said he was frustrated a majority of councillors was kicking the can further down the road. I am hoping it comes to the next council meeting to finally resolve it. It's not fair to anyone to prolong this decision, he said. Speaking with the Standard, Mahmoud said the meeting's outcome was disappointing. Referring to his daughter, who was in the council chamber's gallery, Mahmoud said, she's listening to me. I want to be able to tell her today that this council chose compassion over complication, love over hate, fairness over fear, and unity over division. Another front page story entitled Wrong to Treat Seniors Like This, MPPs Outraged by Plans to Close the Extended Care Unit, is by Alan Benner and Dave Johnson. The Extended Care Unit at Welland Hospital is more than just a healthcare facility for the people there, says Niagara Falls MPP Wayne Gates. It's their home. Some of the 87 residents of the 115-bed facility have lived there for several years. Niagara Health this week announced it will close the long-term care home after its operating license expires in June. People should be outraged, Gates said. We have to do everything we can to stand up and say this is unacceptable. The last thing you want to do is go to a senior and say, well, sorry, we're closing, and we're going to put you somewhere else. It's absolutely wrong to treat seniors like this. The hospital system's chief nursing executive, Simon Akinsuli, earlier said the facility will remain open and fully staffed until all residents have moved elsewhere with the assistance of care coordinators. One of our priorities is to work closely with residents and families so they find a new home that's best for them. And the focus is really on a safer and more appropriate long-term care space, he said. Gates said the closure is also a real blow to the 140 employees who've been caring for the residents who almost became like family. Niagara Health's Vice President of Human Resources, Fiona Peaceful, also recognized the relationships between staff and residents. She said there will be no immediate job losses, and the hospital system is working with unions to explore options, such as redeploying staff where possible. Gates sent a letter to long-term care minister Natalia Kusendova-Bashta Thursday asking the government to intervene. This is really a crisis that I feel the entire community, including the Premier and long-term care minister, should get directly involved with, he said. Niagara Centre MPP Jeff Birch said he understands the concerns that led to the decision to shutter the aged 50-plus-year-old facility. But he said those issues could have been dealt with long ago. This is a long-standing issue that should have been addressed by the provincial government, and we can't keep going on with crumbling infrastructure and crippling hospital deficits and expect that our residents are going to be cared for properly, Birch said. Welland Mayor Frank Campion said he's disappointed that no solutions were found before this week's announcement. This closure is happening very quickly, which causes a lot of problems for me. We're losing long-term care beds in Welland, and we need to have them, he said. In an emailed statement, the ministry said the loss of the 115 beds at Welland is being offset by recent expansions at other long-term care homes. In the Niagara region, we have recently opened 5 new long-term care homes, adding 345 new and 327 upgraded beds. An additional 3 projects are currently under construction in the region that will add 187 new and 596 upgraded beds, it said. That's part of a $6.4 billion government investment to build more than 30,000 long-term care beds across Ontario by 2028 and upgrade more than 28,000 older beds to modern design standards. Carol Duick of long-term care advocacy group Family Council Network 4 said long-term care facility expansions need to happen much sooner than they are. While agreeing Niagara Health's decision to close the extended care unit, but describing it as awful, Duick said there's a big gap between when that happens and when other beds become available. She said wait times for long-term care are growing across the province. Ontario Long-Term Care Home Association has reported more than 50,000 people are waiting for long-term care, doubled what was a decade ago. That includes thousands of Niagarans. Birch said the wait lists are way too long. When people displaced from closed extended care units are moved to the, quote, front of the line for placement in other facilities, he said those who had already been waiting for long-term care beds will now have to wait longer. St. Catharines MPP Jenny Stevens said an average wait of more than 7 months for many people is totally unacceptable when families are in crisis and loved ones need care right now. Closing the Welland long-term care home will only deepen the strain and push more seniors into overcrowded hospitals or unsafe situations at home, she said. Niagara Health said this week it would welcome a third-party organization interested in building and operating a long-term care home on its hospital grounds. In its statement, the Ministry of Long-Term Care said the decision to close a home is made by the licensee, not by the Ministry of Long-Term Care. Once the licensee has notified the Ministry of their plans, we work closely with Ontario Health to ensure residents are able to access the care they need and to maintain or relocate beds to support continued operation in the region. Note, reporter Alan Benner has a family member residing at the extended care unit. Another front page story is entitled Bridge Mural Will Be Something to Be Proud of in Chippewa by Ray Spiteri. A mural is planned for under Waitman Bridge in Chippewa, and the city of Niagara Falls wants residents to offer up suggestions. Artist Megan Cade is leading the project and will review ideas put forward during the creative process while maintaining full artistic freedom in the final design. She will work with high school students from Niagara Christian Collegiate who will assist with painting the mural. Public engagement has opened on the city's Let's Talk website. Until February 15th, residents can provide ideas or themes they believe the mural should reflect. The final concept is expected to be developed by mid-May, with painting to follow. The mural will cover graffiti under the bridge that spans the Welland River in the heart of Chippewa. A lifelong resident of the community, Kate is a full-time illustrator and muralist. I use that walkway every single day in the spring and summer, and it's a real community spot, she said. There's a lot of graffiti down there, but I've noticed it's a big hangout spot. People are swimming, they're fishing, everyone's getting their coffee and their ice cream. It would be really nice to just make something that's beautiful, that represents the identity and something to be proud of in Chippewa. Kate said she pitched the idea to the city about 2 years ago and is really excited it's coming to fruition. Kim Van Stigeren, the city's cultural development coordinator, said she hopes the project will help grow the concept of organized murals in Niagara Falls. One day, hopefully, we'll have lots of murals in the city of Niagara Falls that people can do mural tours and check them out, she said. Van Stigeren said Whiteman Bridge is an ideal spot for a mural, as it's a well-used structure. The city is going to be replacing the lighting underneath, she said. It's also a safe spot to paint. She said there are many layers to a mural. It's quite a process. Picking the colors is one thing, designing the piece is another, but knowing how to prep the walls, knowing how to scale it, how to apply the scaled drawing, knowing drawing timelines. There's so many things that it takes time to learn, and you really do need to be mentored into it, said Van Stigeren. As often as possible, we try to create these mentorship opportunities, and I'm really excited that we have Megan now, who's quite a successful artist, working with us on this. Ideas and themes for the mural have already been submitted and include something to reflect the Battle of Chippewa and Indigenous roots, water and kindness, and positive messaging. Whatever is the most prominent from there is where the artist will take her ideas and create the design from, or maybe she'll incorporate all of it. That's another possibility, as well as she's extremely versatile, said Van Stigeren. She said Niagara Falls has very strong artists and looks forward to other potential partnerships. For example, right across the street from the Niagara Falls History Museum is a mural created by a street artist who's also a tattoo artist, and it's in the building where he does tattoos, said Van Stigeren. It's phenomenal. The talent is out there. We want to try to funnel that talent as much as possible. She encourages private building owners who are interested in mural opportunities to reach out to the city. We try to come up with an agreement in terms of the cost of paint, because obviously it's quite an expense, she said. But we try to come up with agreements to help beautify the areas that work for both sides, the culture department and for the building owners. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Niagara Falls Review on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Finally, on the front page is the headline, which takes us to page 7. Multiple Toronto cops face charges in corruption, organized crime investigation, by Rihanna Lim and Sharif Hassan. From Toronto. 7 Toronto police officers and 1 retired officer are among 27 suspects facing charges in an organized crime and corruption investigation allegedly involving bribery, conspiracy to commit murder, and drug trafficking, among other offenses, York Regional Police announced Thursday. York Police Deputy Chief Ryan Hogan said the investigation began last June after a vehicle rammed a marked York police cruiser parked at the home of a corrections facility officer in what investigators allege was a conspiracy to commit murder involving 2 youth suspects and an adult. Hogan said it was the 3rd time within 36 hours suspects had gone to the home, and the incident sparked an investigation that revealed Toronto officers had accessed personal information and leaked it to members of an organized crime group who then carried out crimes including shootings, extortions, and robberies. Investigators allege that Toronto Police Constable Timothy Barnhart gave personal information to Brian DaCosta, a man suspected of several drug trafficking and bribery offenses, who was among several suspects allegedly seeking confidential information from officers. We allege that Mr. DaCosta is a key figure in a criminal network operating within the Greater Toronto Area with, in fact, significant international ties, Hogan said at a news conference Thursday. Toronto police officers Derek McCormick, Elias Muad, John Madley Jr., and his father, retired Constable John Madley Sr., are among those charged in the investigation. Toronto police officers Barnhart, Robert Black, Sorabjit Bedi, and Carl Grellet were also charged and were allegedly involved in bribery schemes orchestrated by DaCosta, Hogan said. We allege that these officers in particular were involved with Mr. DaCosta in supporting illegal cannabis dispensaries by accepting bribes to provide, ultimately, protection from law enforcement investigation, he said, adding some of the accused officers were also allegedly involved in cocaine trafficking. In addition to DaCosta, 18 other suspects were arrested in the investigation, including 2 youths. Toronto Police Chief Myron Demkew called the case painful and unsettling and said the allegations against the cops do not represent the force. No corner of society is immune from the reach of organized crime, but when organized crime penetrates the Toronto Police Service, the harm goes far beyond the immediate wrongdoing, Demkew said at Thursday's press conference. Corruption has no place in policing. It strikes at the trust people place in us. Demkew said the accused officers have been suspended, and he will seek to suspend at least 4 of them without pay in line with policing laws. He added that officials have asked the province's policing inspector general to conduct an independent investigation, and the force will fully cooperate. A statement from the Toronto Police Service Board said it's asked the inspector general to look into issues including supervision, recruitment screening, access to databases, and more. The board believes that such an inspection is necessary to provide the public with a credible and transparent assessment and to identify any steps needed to strengthen accountability and public safety, the statement said. Toronto Mayor Olivia Chow said at an unrelated press conference Thursday that she supports an independent review of the case, and she plans to meet with Demkew and the police board chair that day. The residents of Toronto deserve to know that the police officer they deal with every day can be trusted, not corrupt, and acting with integrity. Any police officer that is found to have committed crimes will be punished. A spokesperson for the Toronto Police Association said Wednesday it would ensure members receive due process. Turning to the opinion page, Linda McQuaig's opinion, Carney left many nations on menu. It was invigorating to see Prime Minister Mark Carney stand up to Donald Trump in Davos, even though Carney's pithy speech and the adulation it won in European capitals left the U.S. president seething over sharing the spotlight with a mere central banker who'd never had to prove himself on reality TV. Carney's Davos speech was a clarion call for middle powers to join Canada in resisting the U.S. hegemon as it fully abandons the international rules-based order. Middle powers must act together because if we're not at the table, we're on the menu. Carney's correct. We should act together to resist the lawless, power-mad Trump. However, in his enthusiasm for a middle power alliance, Carney devoted little attention to the one forum that the world constructed amid the ruins of the Second World War, specifically to deal with a ruthless megalomaniac with designs on other countries. That is, of course, the United Nations, established when the world's nations came together in the aftermath of Hitler to create a body to restrain aggressors and replace the ravages of war with peace and human development. For all its flaws, the UN remains the embodiment and the closest humans have come to achieving those worthy aspirations. It is the UN and its International Court of Justice that established the rules-based international order to protect the sovereignty of all nations. But the UN is only as strong as its members make it. And in recent years, it's been weakened by the Trump administration, which has deprived it of funding, sought to undermine its authority, and now effectively seeks to replace it with the preposterous, quote, Board of Peace, end quote. So it's disappointing that Carney's Davos speech barely mentioned the UN and focused instead on an alliance of middle powers, leaving many of the world's nations, quote, on the menu. We saw this Western-focused approach from Carney last month when he raised no objections to Trump's kidnapping of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, but was outspoken against Trump's threats against Greenland, which is part of the Kingdom of Denmark. Surely we want a rules-based international order that seeks to protect the rights and security of all the world's nations, as the UN does, and not just the Western countries that would make up a coalition of middle powers. Canada remains supportive of the UN, but we've greatly reduced our UN peacekeeping role and been a less robust UN champion. In 2017, for instance, the Trudeau government refused to join when 2/3 of the UN member nations ratified an ambitious treaty aimed at ultimately ridding the world of nuclear weapons. And Carney had nothing to say as Israeli forces stormed and then burned down, burned down the Jerusalem offices of the UN aid agency, UNRWA, on which millions of Palestinians depend for survival. For that matter, Carney has been largely silent in recent months as Israel has blocked UN aid deliveries and continued to kill Palestinians. More than 500 Palestinians have been killed since the Gaza ceasefire. Carney is right that we can no longer rely on the U.S. to enforce international law. In fact, we never could. Washington was always primarily interested in advancing its own interests. Now that we can abandon any pretense that the U.S. upholds international law, we should put our efforts into strengthening the world body that actually does uphold international law, and does so on behalf of the world community, not just the privileged Western part of it. Linda McQuaig is an author, journalist, and freelance contributing columnist for the Toronto Star. Gwyn Dyer, a London-based independent journalist, has an opinion called Last Arms Control Treaty Expires. Vladimir Putin is a reckless man who invades countries and has his opponents killed, but he understands some things are too dangerous to meddle with. That's why he proposed last September that the United States and Russia should extend their New START nuclear arms control treaty for one more year to gain more negotiating time for renewing it. Donald Trump is also a reckless man who invades countries, but he does not order his opponents killed. On the other hand, he's far more ignorant than Putin, which is why he didn't even make an official reply to the Russian dictator's proposal. If it expires, it expires, Trump told the New York Times last month. We'll just do a better one. Well, it has just expired, and there's no sign that the hyperactive U.S. president is fast-tracking a replacement for what he sees as Obama's treaty. The last in a long series of arms reduction treaties was New START in 2010, which reduced the permitted number of deployed nuclear warheads for each side to 1,550. The treaties were a triumph for common sense and mutual respect, and they probably saved us from a nuclear war at least once in the past 50 years. Without them, the two superpowers might still hold the insane 63,000 plus nuclear warheads that they had in the mid-1980s, enough for a nuclear winter 10 times over. Instead, about 11,000 nuclear weapons are held by the two, even including those that are retired or held in stockpiles. About 1,000 are spread out among more than half a dozen others: France, the United Kingdom, China, Israel, India, Pakistan, and North Korea. So it seems stable enough for now, but it's probably going to get worse for two reasons. One is that those treaty-backed limitations on the established nuclear powers really imposed an unspoken, understood limit on all other nuclear weapons countries, too. They each weigh in at 1/5 to 1/10 of the number of warheads held by the top two. Now, nobody has any limits. If you know military thinking, if you just know human psychology, you will understand this means arms races. You will also understand that the arms races foster paranoia, because each side knows its own motives are pure. Why are these evil people arming against us? So, how are we to get back to arms control and regain the relative safety we've just lost? Not easily, and perhaps not at all. Negotiating arms control treaties is a long, tedious business that requires a firm grasp of huge amounts of detail. This is not Trump's forte. In fact, he is entirely ignorant about the theory and practice of nuclear deterrence. This became clear last August when Trump took offense at something former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev said, and declared he had ordered 2 American nuclear submarines to be positioned in the appropriate positions in response to Medvedev's highly provocative comments. Nuclear deterrence is not taught in every primary school, But the man who is followed everywhere by the football that contains America's nuclear launch codes should know a bit about it, like the fact that nuclear submarines that fire nuclear-armed ballistic missiles are always on station. That's the only thing they do. Their appropriate positions are huge tracts of deep ocean, far from any shore, where they go and remain submerged for several months. They are always within range of their targets, but never come closer than several thousand miles in order to minimize the risk of being detected. A minor detail, perhaps, but it tells us what Trump knows about nuclear weapons. Nothing. He doesn't care about his ignorance either. This is not a man who will put any effort into rebuilding a nuclear arms control agreement. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Niagara Falls Review on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Looking at Canada and the world, new Greenland consulate sparks hopes for action on climate and defense by Dylan Robertson. The launch of a new Canadian diplomatic mission in Greenland is sparking hopes for more collaboration on climate change, Inuit rights, and defense in the face of U.S. President Donald Trump's annexation threats. Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand is set to officially open the new consulate Friday in Greenland's capital, Nuuk, where Canadian consular staff have been operating quietly for several weeks. This should have happened 300 years ago, said Aoju Peter, an Inuit lawyer and artist in Iqaluit, who was born in Greenland. We can learn so much from exchanges and working together. Well, Peter said the consulate could help Inuit in Canada learn a lot from Inuit in Greenland about improving their living standards. It also sends a signal of solidarity with a territory facing an unprecedented threat. Trump has demanded U.S. control of Greenland and only recently backed down from threats to use force to acquire the Danish territory. It's put a lot of people in stress. It's a real threat, Peter said. She said Greenland's leaders have managed to maintain calm, but residents have struggled to keep their children from worrying about their safety. A lot of Greenlanders and myself, we felt threatened where our families and our friends were being put through that kind of talk, said Peter, who organized a large demonstration in Iqaluit in support of Greenland on January 17th. Canada started planning for a consulate in Greenland before Trump's recent talk of annexation. Greenland's government promised to open a diplomatic office in Canada in February 2024. It likely will be located within the Danish embassy in Ottawa. In December 2024, the Trudeau government promised to open consulates in Newark and Anchorage, Alaska, part of efforts to get the NATO military alliance to focus more on threats to the Arctic. Canada's Arctic foreign policy says climate change is opening up new shipping routes, just as the world seeks minerals and gas that could become more accessible. Canada was set to formally launch its new consulate in Newark last November, but bad weather canceled the event. Anand will be joined at the opening ceremony by Governor-General Mary Simon and Canada's Arctic Ambassador Virginia Mearns, both of whom are Inuk. Canada's ambassador to Denmark, Caroline Bennett, a former federal cabinet minister, will also attend. In sports news, Live Barn streaming now is available in West Lincoln. Minor and men's hockey games can be watched online via subscription. By Mark Newman. The rink at West Lincoln Community Centre is the latest venue in Ontario to add Live Barn, a subscription-based service which began streaming live minor hockey action in mid-January. It's predominantly popular with families, grandparents, people who can't make it to the games, but also with the hockey players, Cynthia Summers, West Lincoln's Director of Community and Protective Services, said of the Montreal-based company that offers live streaming for more than 2,000 arenas and other venues across North America. Minor hockey has requested this service. A camera with a protective covering has been installed above the penalty box area and follows the action on ice. Summers said the camera is focused on the ice only and does not show spectators in the seating area. The camera also picks up sound from the rink. Summers said the system has been programmed so the camera is only switched on during West Niagara Minor Hockey Association games and practices, and for some men's league games. Live Barn ran into controversy last summer when cameras were activated and observed children at summer camps and some arenas in the Waterloo area. Patrick Reynolds, the company's senior operations manager for Ontario, said the cameras became active due to a scheduling error. In the case of Waterloo, what happened was there was no blackouts in place at that time. So the automated system switched on when it thought motion was on the arena floor and began streaming, Reynolds said. When we found out about it, we shut it down within a minute or two of finding out. Reynolds said the incident had fewer than 10 views and nothing was downloaded or shared. He said the system was revamped to ensure the cameras stay off when the ice is out of the arenas. Everything's resolved and we're streaming again, Reynolds said. At West Lincoln Community Center, Summers said the township learned from the Waterloo experience and privacy concerns were considered prior to accepting the service. A parent, for example, could say for a particular reason they want to black out a game, and we have the ability to do that, said Summers, adding the municipality will review all such privacy-related requests that come into the community center. Signs have been posted around the rinks notifying people of the presence of the camera and the online service. Summers said the company installed the camera and a Wi-Fi streaming tower at the community center at no cost to the township. She said subscriptions cost $29 to $37 a month, depending on the number of users and devices, and the township gets 30% of the revenue from any purchased through the West Lincoln website at westlincoln.ca/en/recreation-and-leisure/livebarn.aspx. Subscribers have access to all streaming venues. Live Barn is an awesome tool for many reasons, said Jim Borsotti, registrar of West Niagara Minor Hockey Association. The simplest thing is you can watch your kid on the ice if you can't make a game in practice. If your kid or your grandson or your niece or nephew is playing out of town, you can see the game. You can watch it at almost any arena. Borsotti said the association also uses the service to review injuries and any complaints that arise. Yeah, it's a great tool for parents, associations, everybody, said Borsotti, who added the service is available in most Niagara arenas, including Fleming Center and Jordan Lyons Arena in Lincoln. Borsotti said each team or user group has to request the cameras be switched on for its games and practices, and the association has not received any privacy-related complaints. Dave Warden, manager of Public and Open Spaces for Town of Lincoln, said Live Barn has been running at Fleming Center since January 2025 and was installed at Jordan Arena last September. Feedback has been positive, and the town has not received any complaints or concerns related to privacy or the use of the service, Warden said. The service has been well received by both West Niagara Minor Hockey and Jordan Minor Hockey, particularly during tournaments. For example, during a recent tournament weekend, when weather conditions were inclement, families were able to watch games from home, ensuring continued engagement without added travel concerns. In business news, Canada Goose touts diversification. By Tara Deschamps. Canada Goose Holdings Incorporated says its efforts to convince customers to turn to the company for more than a down-filled parka as winter hits are paying off, but investors may not be convinced. While customer demand for the retailer's star product, down-filled outwear, remains strong in its most recent quarter, Canada Goose said Thursday that its non-down-filled outwear grew even faster and was accompanied by gains in lightweight and year-round apparel. That shift is intentional, said Carrie Baker, Canada Goose's president of brand and commercial, on a call with analysts. We want to be able to bring newness to the floor. We want to be able to drive repeat visitors, bring people back to see something new. On the heels of her remarks, and Canada Goose revealing its latest quarter had a smaller profit than last year, the company's stock plunged lower. The shares were down $3.55, or nearly 20%, to $14.55 on the Toronto Stock Exchange in afternoon trading. Canada Goose started out in the 1950s, selling heavy and durable snowmobile suits and woolen vests, but became a household name in the 2000s when its parkas became a luxury status symbol. To keep building sales and ensure people have a reason to return even after they've bought a winter jacket, the Toronto-based company has spent recent years working to remind customers about the breadth of its offerings. The company sells rainwear, lightweight jackets, tops and bottoms, as well as shoes, socks, hats, scarves, and sunglasses. CEO Danny Reese has also mused about eventually getting into the luggage market. While the company is pleased all of its major categories are growing and showing signs of resonating with customers, Baker indicated the company isn't planning to run wild. We are watching it carefully. Obviously, we don't want to get over SKU'd, she said, referencing the unique codes companies assign to each product. We don't want to have too big an assortment for the size of our stores, but right now, we're feeling very comfortable about our mix. Lately, that mix has been focused on introducing newness to the brand. Newness is a term retailers use to describe how fresh their products seem and is largely dependent on the styles, silhouettes, fabrics, and embellishments merchandise has. At Canada Goose, newness isn't always achieved by introducing a ton of new styles, Baker said. Sometimes it comes from revamping bestsellers like the Chilliwack, a bomber coat Canada Goose designed in the 1980s for bush pilots working on Arctic runways. Now they get it in a new fabric. Now they get a new puffer version, and that is working, Baker said. The company's third quarter revenue linked to newness doubled year over year, while its overall revenue ticked up 14.2% to $694.5 million, up from $607.9 million. However, the company revealed the quarter, which is usually the highlight of its fiscal year, brought a drop in profit attributable to shareholders. The metric amounted to $134.8 million, or $1.36 per diluted share for the period ending December 28th, down from $139.7 million, or $1.42 per diluted share a year earlier. Direct-to-customer revenue totaled $591 million for the quarter, up from $517.8 million, while wholesale revenue amounted to $88.3 million, up from $75.7 million. Other revenue totaled $15.2 million, up from $14.4 million a year earlier. On an adjusted basis, Canada Goose says it earned $1.43 per diluted share in its latest quarter, down from an adjusted profit of $1.51 per diluted share a year earlier. Analysts on average had expected an adjusted profit of $1.66 per share and revenue of $658.5 million for the quarter, according to data compiled by LSEG Data and Analytics. The miss is despite one of the best winters ever, BNP Paribas equity researcher, senior analyst Laurent Vasilescu said in a note to investors. Moving forward, Canada Goose Chief Financial Officer Neil Bowden said on the same call as Baker that the company would be reviewing its store network and implementing unspecified optimization initiatives. It will also focus on minimizing expenses like staffing and discretionary spending and growing its margins, he said. Asked whether those moves could include store closures or layoffs, spokesperson Isabella Gambon said in an email Canada Goose plans to open new stores in its upcoming fiscal year, but has a broader focus on driving efficiency across the business. She said the company has also been working to ensure staffing levels are aligned with traffic. You are listening to a reading of the articles and features from the Niagara Falls Review on the Niagara Frontier radio reading service. Ottawa is planning to relaunch EV rebate plan in 2 weeks, by Nick Murray. The federal government announced a suite of new electric vehicle policies Thursday, including the reintroduction of the popular rebate program and the elimination of the EV sales mandate in favor of stricter emission standards for the auto sector. The move is the latest rollback of climate policies enacted by former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. The government of Prime Minister Mark Carney canceled the consumer carbon price and halted the implementation of an emissions cap on the oil and gas sector. Speaking at an auto parts manufacturer in Woodbridge, Carney said Thursday Ottawa pitched the new plan as a transformation of Canada's auto sector, which has been battered for months by U.S. tariffs. We have everything we need to take the lead in the vehicles of tomorrow, and we're positioning Canadian workers and businesses to seize that opportunity, he said. The announcement includes the restoration of the EV rebate program, with $2.3 billion to help Canadians cover the cost of a new EV, a new credit system to benefit automakers that produce vehicles in Canada, and a $1.5 billion investment in EV infrastructure like charging stations. Government officials at a technical briefing Thursday were unable to say exactly what impact these new measures will have on Canada's overall emissions. They promised to publish modeling in the coming months, and the government said it's committed to cutting vehicle emissions in half by 2035. In 2023, passenger vehicles generated 81 million tons of carbon dioxide, or its equivalent in other greenhouse gases, almost 12% of Canada's total emissions. Carney paused the electric vehicle sales mandate last fall, following pressure from provinces and automakers. That mandate, which was supposed to take effect this year, set a target of having EVs account for at least 20% of auto sales across Canada this year. The target was to increase to 100% by 2035. The new system discards the sales targets and instead will ratchet up existing tailpipe emission standards, which the government expects will drive the adoption rate of EVs to 75% of new sales by 2035 and 90% by 2040. Carney said the new standard will set a maximum of 74 grams of carbon dioxide or its equivalent per mile. That's down from the current federal tailpipe emission standard of 172 grams per mile, a 56.9% reduction. Auto companies will be allowed some flexibility on meeting the new standards, including by improving fuel efficiency in gas-powered models. But the government said all companies will be required to increase EV sales over time in order to meet the standard. Ontario Premier Doug Ford, who was not at the announcement, said he welcomes the end of the EV sales mandate as a means to bolster the auto sector in Ontario. In the arts section, filmmaker Besson takes a stab at Dracula by Katie Walsh. Perhaps every filmmaker feels like they have to make their version of Dracula at some point. And it certainly helps that Bram Stoker's 1897 novel has been in the public domain for decades, allowing just about anyone to take a stab at it. Scandal-plagued French filmmaker Luc Besson now offers his take on the notorious bloodsucker, starring his current muse, the actor Caleb Landry Jones, who starred in his 2023 film Dogman. The result is what you might expect from the Cinéma du Luc pioneer, who is best known for Léon the Professional and his sci-fi space operas The Fifth Element and Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets. Besson's Dracula is over the top, highly stylized, and speckled with outrageous creatures, visual effects, and a plot that somehow connects Count Dracula to the centennial anniversary of the French Revolution. There is also, of course, sexual frenzy, but that element has always been baked into the Dracula tale. Besson takes his personal liberties with Stoker's novel, though the bones remain. Also titled Dracula, A Love Story, Besson positions Vlad II, Prince of Wallachia, Count Dracul Jones, as a love-sick warrior pursuing his dearly departed wife, Elisabetta, Zoe Bleu, across the centuries, from 1480 to the late 19th century in Paris. He finds her doppelganger and a young socialite, Mina Murray, also Bleu, who is a close friend of his vampiric consort, Maria Matilda de Angelis. Mina also happens to be engaged to Jonathan Harker, Ewan Zabid, a solicitor who pays a visit to the Count at his Romanian palace for a real estate deal. Meanwhile, a priest, played by Christoph Waltz, is hot on Dracul's heels, hoping to destroy him and break the curse of vampirism he's placed on every person he's turned into a vampire. Of course, we know this story from the book, from Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula, and mostly from Robert Eggers' Christmas 2024 sensation Nosferatu, and many, many more adaptations. Besson innovates with a subplot about Dracula's foray into the world of perfume as he develops an intoxicating fragrance in Florence using French lavender testing the potion on the pre-revolution socialites in towering white-powdered wigs. Besson's version is pitched somewhere between Coppola's opulently designed version and Egger's more restrained sexual spookfest, but Besson adds his own bizarre flair, including an army of CGI gargoyles that do Dracula's bidding. Anytime the film veers into computer-generated territory, it takes on a sheen of cheesy artifice. When the film is set within the confines of beautifully production and costume-designed interiors, it's far more compelling. Besson always manages to get his actors on the same page he is, and both Jones and Blur match the campy operatic tone in their melodramatic performances. DeAngelis and Walter also a hoot together, she as a heaving, hissing vampire bride who can't stop licking her chops. He is a bone-dry vampire hunter dedicated to his investigation. But the script for Besson's Dracula keeps getting distracted with multiple flashbacks. The film opens with a 15-minute prologue in which Vlad straps on his fanged helmet and rides into battle. When Elisabetta is killed, he renounces God and sets off on his quest for love. As he tells his story to Harker, we get flashbacks to the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, while Waltz's priest, the most entertaining part of the film, disappears completely. The film culminates in an almost Scarface-like showdown that sees the vampire making his last stand, sword in hand, and ultimately, Besson twists the novel's last sacrifice to be more in line with his vision of the love-mad hero vampire. A film should be evaluated for what's on the screen rather than what's off, but with this film one does have to sit with the accusations of sexual assault and misconduct levied against Besson, as well as his marriage to a pregnant teenager in his 30s, and how he positions Vlad Dracul in his adaptation. The character is a decrepit monster, hundreds of years old, feeding off the blood of young women, and Besson presents him as a romantic hero and martyr for love. Maybe every filmmaker should make their own Dracula. It's a text that certainly can be quite illuminating. The advisory is for 14A in Canada for violence, some gore, and sexuality. The running time 129 minutes, and it is now in select theaters. In local news and significant with this weekend's weather, pretty to look at but dangerous, Fort Erie warns against getting too close to ice caves by Mike Zettel. With a cold weekend on the horizon, people tired of being cooped up might be tempted to bundle up and get a close look at ice formations on Lake Erie. For those venturing out, the town of Fort Erie has a warning. Do so at your own risk. The recent frigid weather and heavy snowfall has brought back spectacular ice caves along the shoreline of South Niagara. Last weekend, Crystal Beach Waterfront Park was a popular destination for explorers and photographers. People could be seen walking underneath overhanging caves that are formed by wind-driven waves that push water under a shoreline ice shelf. Then, the water vents upward, and when the temperatures are low enough, freezes into caves on cone structures, often referred to as ice volcanoes. But while these formations are an impressive display of Mother Nature's artistry, they should be viewed from a distance, preferably on the shore. On Tuesday, the town warned people not to venture onto the ice. It said the ice and formations on top of it are not nearly as solid and stable as they look. They are hollow and can be situated above open water. And even if they meet the stomp test, their strength can change quickly. Warming air, sun, rain, wind, and waves can all work to weaken the ice. Waves can undermine the strength from below and create hidden holes with no visual indication of their sudden instability. Fire Chief Mark Schmidt said, even when ice does hold up, a combination of sunshine, heavy foot traffic, and freeze-thaw cycles can make the ice extra slippery. This increases the potential for injuries from slips and falls. While the formations are relatively close to the shore and accessible, such injuries needlessly tie up emergency responders. It's an unnecessary rescue, he said. I don't want to tell people don't come, but at the same time, I want them to know the risks. Schmidt added regular parking restrictions remain in place in Crystal Beach. Bylaw officers are frequently looking for infractions, such as vehicles blocking emergency access. Police will be dealing with traffic issues as officers see fit, he said. While there's a general rule of thumb that ice 10 centimeters, 4 inches thick, or more is safe to walk on, Schmidt said no ice is safe. In 2014, the overwhelming crowds and rising temperatures prompted the town to tear the structures down. Tommy Piesel, acting director of infrastructure services, said the town isn't planning to do anything to disturb the ice caves at this point. Instead, staff will be installing signs at points of access, Waverly Beach, Bay Beach, and Waterfront Park, advising people of the dangers. Nature will gradually take its course, and the ice caves will dwindle away and become fragile and break, and we just don't want people out there while that's happening, he said. Schmidt said the town will keep an eye on rising temperatures, as well as the popularity of the attraction. If the area gets too overloaded and impedes emergency access, the town may have to take additional steps. For me, I'm definitely looking at the Family Day weekend and what the weather's going to be like around it, he said. With most people having a long weekend and wanting to do something fun with the kids, I just need them to understand the risk that they're taking by going there. Besides, he said, there are other ways to see them. There are some great drone shots of these ice caves. I'm not sure you have to physically go out there to see them in person, but that's up to the individual. And a painting honoring Kristen French will hang in City Hall by Ray Spiteri. A large square painting depicting a peaceful winter scene at Martindale Pond in St. Catharines in honor of Kristen French is now on display at Niagara Falls City Hall. The 1.5 square meter oil-on-canvas piece, created by Jordan area artist Jennifer Elliotson, was auctioned off during Kristen French Child Advocacy Center's Bravehearts Gala last November. The event raised just shy of $184,000 to support Niagara children and families who have been impacted by child abuse. The center had listed Elliotson's piece, titled Last Skate Before Sunset, to sell at $4,700. It ended up selling for $11,000. The winning bidder was Carmine Negro, a supporter of local art and community spaces. He opted to donate the painting to the city of Niagara Falls, where it was unveiled during a ceremony Wednesday on the second-floor lobby at City Hall, across from the entrance to council chambers. Kim Rossi, development director at the Kristen French Center, said Elliotson has painted several pieces for the St. Catharines facility. We asked her if she's interested in helping us create a piece in Kristen's memory that we could auction off at the gala, and she jumped at it, Rossi said. French was 15 when she was abducted near her St. Catharines home and murdered by Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka in 1992. We knew through Marcia Penner, Kristen French's best friend, that Martindale Pond was a place she loved to go with her figure skates to practice. Elliotson said she visited the pond last winter to gather reference photos and noticed it was full of life. That day I noticed a young woman in white skates twirling across a clear patch of ice. She was practicing her turns and jumps, figure skating on the pond. How serendipitous, she said. This is exactly what Kristen would have done. Elliot said, when the pond freezes and the landscape turns into a winter wonderland, visitors clear the ice, set up hockey nets, and drill holes for fishing. Dog walkers make their way across the path,